Hello everyone, welcome back to Abda channel. In the last video, we have seen about creating the Firebase project and creating the Spring Boot project and how to configure the Firebase secret file into your Spring Boot project. Okay, now we will in today's video we will make utilizing that JSON file which was generated in the Firebase console, and we will create a connection to the Firebase database, and we will also create a record into a collection into the Firebase database. Okay, that is the agenda for today's video. Okay, let me start with that. So this is where we left off in the last video, right? So we have copied the JSON file into our project, and we also added the dependency for the Firebase admin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class that will create a connection to Firebase. Okay, now let me go to the class. I'm going to create this class in config package, which is Firebase config. Okay, yeah, in this is the Firebase config, right? So here I have to, if you remember, in our last video we have seen that Firebase console has given this code snippet. So we have to utilize this code snippet and connect to the Firebase, create a connection to the Firebase database. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll create a method public void configure Firebase connection. Okay. This is my method, and in that method I'm pasting the code which is given by the Firebase itself. So here I'm loading the JSON file, and the JSON file is having the service account details that will be used to initialize the Firebase application to create a Firebase database connection. Okay, so if you see this, these all are giving errors, right? Firebase options, Firebase app. Okay, now if you press Ctrl Shift O, it is giving the APIs com.google auth to Google credentials, Firebase app. These are all coming from the dependency which we have added Firebase admin. Okay, after that it is still showing some errors. Okay, unhandled exception type file not found. So let us throw the exceptions. Okay, this method is throwing exceptions. Okay, still here we have to add the path of our JSON file, right? This is the path. Okay, this is there in our class path, right? So let me take the file name from here. This is the file name, and this is present in my class path, right? So class path colon config, this is there in the config folder in the class path src main resources. Under config I have the JSON file, right? The same JSON file name, I copied it here. Okay, now it is still giving some warning. That's okay. So that's all. Okay, we have initialized the application, the Firebase application. It is going to create a connection for us. Okay, now what we will do is we will create a service class. The service class will utilize this connection and create a record, okay, into the collection, the fire which will be created in the Firebase database. Okay, now this service class I'm going to create it in my service package. Okay, I'm naming it as customer service. Okay, the customer service will always be having interactions with Firebase. Okay, now what I'm going to do is this service class I'm going to annotate with at service. Okay, now I'm going to create a method public void create customer This customer object I'm going to get it from the client. Okay, the moment I mention the customer object, it is asking me for a class, right? So let me create a class customer. I'm not going to create it in the service, but I'm going to create it in the entity, because this is the entity I'm going to store it in the database, right? So I have to, I'll keep that in the entity package. Okay, let me create a class now. Firebase dot entity. Okay, customer is the class name. Now this is again a simple job in, right? So I'll create it as component. I'll annotate that as component. Now here I'm going to have the class level variables, string name, private string email, private long mobile, private string ID. Okay. Now let me generate the getters and setters for it. Okay, this is my entity class. Okay, for which the data I will be getting from the client. Okay, I have to import that entity class now here. Okay, now I have to connect to the Firebase database. I have the connection here already, right? This is going to be executed. We will mention when it has to be executed by using annotations, but we will see what will happen, what error we will get if we don't annotate this class or this method with with any annotation. Now we have to get the connection, right? So there is a class available, Firestore client dot get Firestore. Okay, this gives us the connection. Okay, that is Firestore. Okay, Firestore. Okay, now once we get the connection, we have to use that connection object and get the collection. Okay, see, collection means it's a table, right? So we are searching for a table. Okay, if it is there in the database which we have connected, if the table with this name is there, it will be extracted. The data will be, the details of the table will be extracted. But if it is not there, the collection with this name, the specified name, will be created. Okay, so here we are having a method. Okay, document. Okay, if you see, this returns a document reference pointing to a new document with an auto generated id within this column. Okay, the moment I call the document method, a new row will be created with an auto generated id. Okay, that row we have to capture it into document reference. If you see this is the return type is document reference. Okay, so let me capture it into document reference first. Okay, doc reference. Okay, document reference I have imported. Now it has created a new row with an auto generated id, right? See here, my customer object is also having some id. Okay, now that auto generated id, I want to assign it to my customer object id column. Okay, so whatever the client, from client I will be getting only the name, email and mobile, but not the id. But the id is generated from this service class after calling the document. So that id I'll be inserting I'll be assigning to the customer object, customer dot set id of doc reference dot get id. Okay, so once the id has been set to the object that was received from the client, I am going to insert the whole customer object into the database. Okay, so in order to insert the record or a document into the database, we have to call the doc reference. Okay, this doc reference is already pointing to the customer collection. So doc reference dot, there is a method available, set. Okay, so to this set method we can pass either of these. Okay, so let us use the poso variant now. Okay, object variant. So what is the object we are getting from client? We are getting from client the customer object, and we have added the id to it. Okay, the moment you call set, right, what it is returning, it is returning API future. Okay, so it is going to insert, but it will be an asynchronous operation. If you see this, an API feature that will be resolved when the write finishes. Okay, it just gives us the future object. Okay, but that will be resolved once the write operation is completed. So we have to get the API future of a write result. Okay, API future of write result. This is the return type of this method. Okay, API future. Okay, write result, right? Okay, I'm going to use the first one, Cloud Firestore. Okay, now we are done with it now. Okay, so that's all. Let's run this program. Okay, before running this application, this is a service class, right? I have to create a controller as well, and from that controller I have to call this service, right? Firebase dot controller. Okay, customer controller. Okay, in I am going to annotate this customer controller as REST controller, and request mapping as slash customer. Now I'm going to have a method public void create customer. Okay, I'm going to get the customer from the client as the request body. So request body. Okay, and this will be the post method. Okay, post mapping. Okay, after post mapping, and this will not be having any request URL after customer. I'm just having localhost 8080 slash customer slash. If it is coming as post method, I have to insert the record. Okay, so here we have to use the customer service, right? Customer service. This will be auto wired here. Okay, now I have to call the method that is there in the service from here. Okay, customer service dot create customer, and I'm passing the customer object, whatever I have received from the client. So to this one, the moment customer service receives the request, it is going to create an object, a new document, and that ID will be added to the customer input object, and the updated customer object, we are setting it to the document. Okay, now that's all. Okay, we are done with the controller, we are done with service, we have created a Firebase configuration class as well. Okay, now let me run this application as a Spring Boot application. We will see. Yep, it is created, right? Okay, I mean the application is up and running now. Now let me go there, http://localhost 8080 slash customer. Okay, this is a post request, right? So in the post request also we have to send the JSON request. So this is having a request body, right? Let me copy it from the earlier, okay, where I'm having it. Well, let me see it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you see this, I'm just giving email, mobile, and name. That's it. Okay. And this is the post request. And after customer, there is a slash. Okay. So this request will be handled by this handler mapping method. This method, customer slash, and it accepts whatever the body that is there into this bean, customer entity. Okay. Now let me trigger a request to it. See, we are getting the 500 internal server error. We will see what is the error now. See this here, Firebase app with name default doesn't exist. It is by default getting the pulling the default app. Okay, but whatever the app we have configured in our JSON file is not being picked up, because here we have written a class, but we have not instructed the container to pick this and create a connection object. Okay, this is not getting executed at all. Okay, so if you want this to be executed, we have to annotate the class so that the container will pick up this class and execute the method. Okay, we'll see. Okay, at service I am instructing. Okay, so now let us see what will happen. Let me run it now. Started. Still I am getting the 500 internal server error because it is still picking up the default app. The whatever the app that is mentioned in my JSON file, it is not being picked up. So the class is being the bean for this class is being created, but this method is not being executed. So I want this method to be executed after the bean is created for this class. So if you want any method to be executed after a bean is created, then that method should be annotated with post construct annotation. Okay, now let's see. Okay, this method will also be executed. We'll see that. Let me restart the application. Yep, see this, now it is giving some error. It is actually trying to load that file, class path colon config slash spring boot firebase 100 firebase admin sdk, some JSON file it is trying to load. Okay, but it is saying file not found exception. Okay, let's see that. We placed it in the src main resources config. Okay, and we are referring from, yeah, the way we have to load the class path reference, right? Not like this. Okay, this is there in the class path, right? So we have to use the resource utils dot get file, resource utils dot get file. Here we have to use this path so that it will be loaded from the class path into this. Okay, now I have to give it a file. This file I have to pass it here. Okay, file input string cannot be picking up the data from the class path, right? So class path will be loaded into this file variable and the file reference will be passed into the file input string. Now let me run this file. If you see that, yeah, now the application is started successfully. So it is, this bean is created, and after the bean creation this method is also getting executed, and the Firebase app I mean the database connection is established to this Firebase. Okay, now the app is actually the initialized, the Firebase app is actually initialized now. Now let me hit the request from client. Okay, here we are not having any. Okay, let me go to Firestore database. Here we are not having anything, right? The moment the record is inserted, it automatically creates a collection and also a row or a document into that collection. Let's see that. Yeah, there is no error, and there is no, it is a 200 okay, and there is no message also in the response. Okay, but let's see any errors. There are no errors in the logs as well. But now let me go to the collection here. Okay, let's see whether any data is inserted or not. Yep, see this, the whatever name I mentioned there, with that customer, this is the customer, right? I mentioned here. So as the customer collection is not there already in the database, it has created a customer collection first. And then the moment I call the document with empty arguments, it has created a new document as well. Okay, what on the with an auto generated ID, and that ID will be assigned to our ID column. Okay, that is what we have done it from here. We will check all these updates are done properly or not in the database now. Okay, so this is the customer. If you see this, this is the document in that customer collection. So whatever the ID that was assigned, that was generated automatically during the insertion, right? That we have assigned to the ID column, ID field. Okay, email, whatever we have sent, mobile is there, name is there. So this itself is a proof that we are successfully able to insert or create a collection and insert a document into that collection from our Spring Boot application. But if you look at here, there is no message. Okay, we are just getting only 200 okay. Okay, just we are relying on the HTTP status. But how about sending some ID that was inserted for this transaction, and also the timestamp when it was inserted in response of this transaction, in response to this request. Okay, let's see that. Okay, let's create, I mean basically here we are not sending any response even from the controller as well, right? So for service also not sending any response, it is just inserting the record, and it is just giving the execution. Okay, and it is waiting for it to complete. That's it, it is not returning anything. So if you want to return some meaningful response object, right, we have to return something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create customer create response. Okay, customer create response. I'm going to create a new bean. Okay, in the beans Firebase, I'm going to create a new class in the beans package. Customer create response in the beans package. Now, what I want to return from after successful insertion, I want to return the ID that was inserted for that request, and I want to return the date when it was inserted. Okay, updated time. It will be java.util.date, and it is just a component, just a bean. Okay, I don't need any special behaviors for this bean. That's why I'm just annotating with the component annotation. Now I'm going to generate getters and setters for all these two attributes. Okay, now the customer create response is ready. Okay, I want that object to be injected here. Okay, either you can auto-wire it or you can create a customer create response object using the new operator. Okay, that's okay. But let me create, let me auto-wire it. Okay, customer create response, customer create response. This is the object, and let me auto-wire it. Okay, customer create response. Okay, so here it just given the instruction to the database. Okay, and it gives us the future object, right? So once that is completed, what we will get is set ID. Okay, that's okay. So here API future dot, there is a method get. Okay, if you see that, waits if necessary for the computation to complete and then retrieve its result. Okay, so I want to wait for its operation for the insertion to complete to get the updated time when the record was inserted. So I have to use the get now. Once the operation is completed, it gets the response into the API future actual response. Once I get that, I'll get this updated time when actually the record was inserted. Okay. If you see this, there is a method we have written, right? Set updated time. Okay, so get updated time gives us the timestamp. Yeah, we have to convert that to date. Okay, what is this error? Yeah, see this, the moment you add a get, it is actually throwing some exceptions. We have to handle it or throw some exceptions, unhandled exceptions. So let me throw these exceptions. Okay, okay, now that's okay, we have added the updated time. We also want to send customer create response dot set id. Id also we want to send, right? What is the id? Customer dot get id, the same whatever the record that was inserted, the same records id we want to send it. So we want to return this customer create response object from here. So we are done with the service now. Okay, now if we go to the controller, it is throwing some errors now here. Okay, now here also I have to return customer create response whatever I receive from service. Okay, the moment I add, I have to import it, and also I have to throw the exceptions because the service is throwing exceptions, right? So I have to throw the same exceptions from here as well. So that's all. Okay, let me run this again. We will create one more insert or few more inserts now. Okay, I'm not going to insert the ID column. We have seen that it is automatically inserted, right? Okay. This is the database record I'm going to insert into the customer by assigning the new request. You will see some kind of response difference now. Not only the status code. We'll wait for it to complete. See, the record is inserted in the database now. Scott, Scott phone number, ID also assigned. The generated ID assigned to the ID attribute. Okay. See this, earlier there is no response object, right? Now we are returning proper response to the client. So that client will take up this response and act accordingly to show the proper message to the proper success message to the user. Okay. So let me create one more record. Okay, one more record is inserted now. If you see this, the third record is inserted. Okay, so that's all about connecting to the Firebase database from the Spring Boot and creating the record. We have created a service class. We loaded the connection object, and we have created a collection. If it is not there, it will be created. If it is there, the existing one will be used, and the document method will be used to create a new document with the auto generated id, and that id we can use it to assign to our custom attribute, and the updated object we have sent it for execution. So immediately it gives the response. Once the operation is completed, then only the future object will be having some data into the from the Firebase database into this object. So then once the operation is completed, if you want to wait till the operation completion, then we have to call the get method, get updated time, the time when the record was inserted into the database. So all this updated time and the id, we are assigning it to the customer create response and sending it to the service controller. The client will be able to know the id of the record that was inserted and also the time at which the record was inserted. We have seen all these things with live coding and the detailed explanation. In the next video we will talk about the fetch operation. Okay, we will talk about the different kinds of fetch operations. We will see how to fetch all records and how to fetch the records based on a search query by name. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Please give it a like, share and subscribe to my